yeah. So it's okay, yeah. If it was about Gaza and the war, I wouldn't. Because, like, now any word that you are saying is just you're anti-Semitic or you're Islamophobic, like whatever.
So, hello and good evening, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Johansson-Oges, and I'm an associate professor at IBI. It's my great pleasure to present to you today Assem Dandashly. He's associate professor at the Maastricht University in Holland. He did his PhD in political science at the University of Victoria in Canada. And before he joined Maastricht, he was at several very distinguished places. So he's a well-vetted expert on many topics that has to do with EU, the MENA, and just broader aspects of politics in and around the region. So we would very much look forward to listening to your presentation today, Assem, titled Crisis, What Crisis? Lebanon from a Weak to a Paralyzed State. And hopefully you will leave us with something positive to think about before we leave here today. All right.
So well,
the floor is yours.
Thanks. And how can I...
The clicker there, yeah. See if it works. If it's on. Maybe.
I think I will stand up. So my talk is about the situation in Lebanon and the crisis of Lebanon. And when I started thinking about this, I was wondering, like, what crisis? I grew up in Lebanon, and for us, crisis is something normal. It's just like we move from one crisis to another, like from the civil war to different couple of conflicts with Israel. So we were normalized. Thanks. So we were normalized in that situation. But what I will focus on is mostly the recent crisis. But to give you some context, since the creation of Lebanon and the end of the colonization period, the system that has emerged was a purely sectarian system, in which there was an agreement that each of the sects in Lebanon receive like certain positions, and especially at the senior level positions. So the president has to be a Maronite, the Speaker of the House has to be a Shiite, and the head of the cabinet has to be a Sunni. And the rest of the positions are allocated according to the various sects. Coming out of that, 1948, the creation of Israel, Lebanon had to also enter into another set of crises, and that was with the Palestinian refugees coming to Lebanon from Palestine. And that led to many refugee camps being created, etc., and I will come back to that point later in my talk. That led to the escalation of the situation in the 70s, even prior to that, with the attacks from southern Lebanon on the northern part of Israel, and that led eventually to the Civil War. Growing up in the Civil War, jumping from one place to another, hiding, sheltering, etc. It wasn't only a civil war, but also because we had different wars with Israel along the way. 1989, the Ta'if Agreement, and in which this agreement led to the end of the war and created a new constitution that is supposed to be more balanced. And one of the things that the constitution, the Ta'if Agreement, many criticize it, but I do believe that it was the best that we could achieve at that time. And until now, I still believe it is the best scenario that we have. However, the biggest problem is we haven't applied the Ta'if Agreement, in which it looks at two main things that Lebanon suffers from until now and resulted somehow in what we call one of the three catastrophic crises since the mid-19th century. One is sectarianism, which dominates in not only in the day-to-day life, but also in the political judiciary, in all the different aspects of the institutions. And the second thing is not dealing with, not pushing for decentralization and fighting corruption. These were two things that were recognized in the Ta'if Agreement and in the Constitution of the 1990, but they were set aside. Decades after the Ta'if Agreement, we still have everything relatively the same, based on sectarianism. And this didn't even decrease, but it even expanded in size. So in the Ta'if Agreement, or in the previously, it used to be the senior officials, like rank 1 positions have to be based on sects. But this evolved to the second, third. Even if you want to hire the lowest tier in the government, it has to be to recognize the sectarian balance. And we're talking sectarian balance not between Christians and Muslims, between Christians among each other, because, you know, we have 17 sects in Lebanon. So a country that is 5,500,000 has 17 sects, representing, I think, all the different religions in the world. So all this was putting more and more problems. And then we had in the 2000s the Hariri assassination, in which it was sort of a major event that, in a way, it was a very sad event, because he's considered to be the one who rebuilt Lebanon after the war, debatably. But still, he was like a popular and an international figure that had a lot of reputation and respect. With the assassination of Hariri, one thing that was achieved is that the Syrian occupation ended. Physically. Keep this in mind. All Syrian troops withdrew from Lebanon, but it's like the spider's nest. In every institutions, everywhere, you have people who still support the Syrians and are more allied with Syria. And now with what's happening in the region, it's not only about Syria, it's Syria going through the Iran, so all the resistance belt, what they call. Now, all these issues have led somehow to problems in the system. And remember what I said about the corruption and sectarianism. So even contracts had to go through the sectarian lines. Even if a project that would cost like very little, and you quadruple the amount, this would happen. And under Hariri, the father, before he passed away, we had certain setbacks, but like the international community was helping. We had Paris 1 agreement, Paris II agreement, Paris III agreement with Hariri, with Senura after the death of Hariri. But then the Cedar, or Paris IV, came. And now the international community said, hold on. There is 11 billion euros, but these are conditional. You cannot take the money anymore and do nothing. At the same time, with Hariri the son, he tried to do a lot of efforts to reform, also debatably, because it's all about like who's taking what from the cake. And all this resulted in the collapse of the economic system, which was based on pegging the currency to the dollar at any expense. And this was sort of a bubble. And people were living beyond their means. You put money in the bank, high interest. The bank deposit this money with the central bank with higher interest, like which was, sometimes the interest was double digits. And the money was spent by the government. After a while, this Ponzi scheme collapsed. People tried to get money from their banks. They couldn't. They tried to withdraw their money. Now, like so you hear it from time to time that when people want to get their entire amount, they can use, sometimes they use force. And weapons are not something that is not found everywhere in Lebanon. So anyways, so the crisis happened. And that was just a very quick, brief overview of decades of context. There doesn't seem to be a clear turning point in this crisis, because now the entire discussion of the crisis is on hold. The discussion is like we need to elect a president, but they cannot agree on who the president should be. At the same time, now, like the discussion is not even about the president; it's about the general of the army, the head of the army, whose term will expire soon, and this will result in major issues, because especially with the situation on the borders with Israel and the escalation of the situation on the southern borders with Israel, you need the military to be stable. And now the discussion is what to do. No one is talking about the crisis. No one is talking about like the hyperinflation. No one is talking about even the currency that was, for every dollar it was 1,500 liras. Now it's for every dollar, I think the last time I followed is 90,000 something. So you go to the supermarket, you pay in dollars. Everything is in dollar. Or you have to carry like big chunks of money. Similar to Venezuela, I think. So the situation is really bad. But in 2019, Hariri resigned. From 2019 till now, the situation doesn't seem to change. The only thing that seems to be surviving from this crisis is the elites. These are the survivals of the crisis. Like people leave, migrate, economy collapses further, things are not working, but the elites are still there. And they are the same people who basically were fighting each other in the civil war, with some changes, because like the father dies, the son takes over, so that's how it is. But what I will focus on in the next minutes is how can we understand the situation? And I will look at it from two angles. One is from the internal, and I will look at legal, societal, and political, and one is external. And I added to it also what's happening now in Gaza, because it's also relevant to Lebanon. Coming to the internal, I think you saw this before. So, so the way I see we had the crisis. So my starting point is, let us say we had the 2019 crisis as a starting point. Like there's a lot of discussions in the literature, in the policy papers, etc. How did we get there? But my question is not how did we get there? Why we're still there, and why the state, despite its paralysis, despite that nothing is functioning, the elites are still there. And they were re-elected, most of them, in the latest elections. And the civil society and the opposition managed to secure only, I think, 11 or 13 seats in the 128 seats in the parliament. So you can imagine that the majority are based on, the majority of the MPs are like those who were ruling the country over the years. Nothing really changed. Of course, they alternate, like now they are opposition against the system, etc. But at the end of the day, no one can deny that all of them are accomplices to what happened and why the country is here. Now, looking at the legal mechanisms, one of the interesting things when we talk about democracy promotion, we can talk about many things: human rights, civil liberties, LGBT rights, gender equality, etc. But one key element that many countries, even when they democratize, try to side it or put it aside is the judiciary. One of the things in Lebanon is the judiciary is used as a political insurance. In terms of appointments, the appointees in many places, especially like senior positions, are based on sectarianism, clientelism. Expertise is important, but doesn't come first. This is one. The second thing, it's not only about the appointees. Let us say that if one person from you had a good judge, an objective judge he found like a corruption scandal against someone. This goes nowhere, because most of those who are involved in the government are protected. Most of those contractors for the government are protected. If you want to deal with one a contractor, for example, that is allied with the Speaker of the House, you cannot touch him unless you have to touch someone else from the other groups. So that renders the judiciary really dysfunctional. And also sometimes the judiciary is the entire actions of many judges is not about about the truth, about the rule of law. It's about just basically because their leader told them yeah, this guy is a troublemaker, let us open a few things against him. And this happened a lot with the central banker, Salami. But as if they made him seem as if he's responsible for all the mess. He's a smart guy. He's the engineer of the mess, but he's not the one to be blamed. Everyone who held office from the 1990s until now, if we have a rule of law and not rule by law, all of them will be in prisons now. But on the contrary, they are not. They are still in their positions. And they are still, as I said, the parliament, the Speaker of the House, I think, is the longest serving Speaker of the House in the world, right? Since I grew up in the 90s, and I remember that he's still there. 1992, the elections, he was the Speaker of the House until now. So that's 30. Another element is the political economic. Am I good on time? Okay. So one of the issues that we noticed is these guys there are warlords. At the same time, after the end of the war, they took off the military suit and the AK-47, and they dressed in the civilian suit. And with the Taif agreement, like there was a pardon for everyone except if there's any crime that is committed afterwards, and I will not go into details. But all these, some of them are still alive, some of them are still holding political positions, or like they gave their positions or their political house to their next in kin, their sons. So this is Jumblat, who inherited his position as the leader of the Druze from his father, who was killed, assassinated. And then he gave his position, he took a step back, now I want to retire, not totally, and he gave it to his son. And people seem to go into that. Because don't forget, it's a very clientelistic system with the dysfunctioning of the state for a long time. As I said in the beginning, we grew up talking about crisis. What crisis? Like a crisis for someone in the north could be like not being able to go on vacation twice a year. A crisis in Lebanon, or for us, was no water. You have to buy it privately via like tanks that comes and fill your tank with water. Electricity. What electricity? Everything is privatized, so you have generators. Whenever it rains, you need a boat to go, like on the streets. What else? Like internet. Like whenever I am in Lebanon doing interviews or visiting family, and I have to talk over have a Skype call or Zoom or whatever. Like it's really a torture. What is functioning? And someone told me, like, hopefully things will not go bad between Israel and Lebanon because of what's happening in Gaza. And then I said, like, you have nothing to bomb. Everything is destroyed. We just have functioning. The only functioning institution is the airport. And it needs renovation. So you name it. Like, nothing is really functioning. So when you talk about crisis, people are accustomed to that. But this was also purposefully done. Like, like for example, social welfare doesn't even exist. If you don't have private insurance, you might die at the hospital's doors because they won't let you in. And then enters the political elites. You need something from, like you're from this sect, you go to you have channels to go. And then you go to civil societies that are doing the job of the state. And the state remains silent or hands off, unfortunately. When the crisis hit, everyone knows what needs to be done. But nobody wants to do it. Because disagreements among the different political parties, blame shifting, that it's not us, it's that group that resulted in this mess. Third thing, how the entire situation is how to prolong the crisis further. Because we cannot agree who's going to take the blame. And another thing is the commercial banks, central bank, and the elites have sort of a trinity, untouched. So every single plan that the government put to deal with the crisis, the majority of the plans talk about everything but returning the money to the people. So let us say you have $1 million in the bank, forget about it. Because commercial banks cannot give back their money because they say that the central bank took it. The central bank is insolvent. have lost significant amount of money over the past, since 2019. So there are reports that talk about tens of thousands of like 40 or so billion dollars as reserves before on the 2019, and now there isn't much, just the basic 13 or 11 billion dollars that cannot cover the debt that exceeds the 100 billion euros. One example of this corruption also among the elites is the electricity sector. As I said, we don't have electricity. But you know that 60 billion or 60% of the debt is because of the electricity sector? Now, if you criticize that group who has been running the electricity sector, you don't go anywhere. Like you will, like the entire social media will be hammering you with all the that they didn't let us work, we tried, etc., etc. But where are the billions of dollars that were spent to have 24/7 electricity? Where did they go? Nobody knows. They just evaporated. And the problem is, you have a lot of similar scenarios in every institution. Like in the communication sector, you have high levels of corruption. Every institution in the government does suffer from corruption, and nobody does anything because the hands are tied. The system is so divided, so corrupt, that even when you have some like civil society organization leaders or some like politicians who are calling for decentralization, fighting corruption, establishing like functioning state based on the rule of law, they just basically hit a dead end. And over the years, we always had like national unity governments in which like all the differences between the different parties are moved to the executive. And imagine having like a representative of all the 17 or whatever parties that exist in the government. It won't be able to produce anything. It will become a dysfunctioning government. And this has been ongoing for years. And even during the midst of the crisis, after Hariri resigned, we had Hassan Diab government. He defaulted on, he didn't pay the Eurobonds because some group of politicians said you shouldn't pay it. Without having any plan or agreement with the debtors, we just simply didn't pay. And that added to the misery further because that group considers paying the debt is wasting the money in such a situation. Keep in mind that the central bank kept subsidizing many products, such as diesel, oil, gas, etc. Some pharmaceutical products as well. But after you subsidize these products for the internal use, where do they end up most of the time? Across the borders in Syria. And Lebanon has been used over the years to help the Syrian regime survive, especially in terms of foreign currency because of the embargoes on Syria. Final internal issue is the societal. What crisis? People are cynic. Like, you talk about crisis, like this is when people protested. They tried to do something, but then the counter-protests who were funded or pushed by the political elites against those protesters resulted in the protests escalating to fights, common fights between the group that supports the ruling elites and those who wanted change. That led to frustration. Add to this, the COVID situation came, and it was used smartly by the government. You cannot meet. It's for your own safety. Not because we don't want you to protest, but it's for your own safety. And that basically toned down the demands for change, and people felt basically helpless. And that's when the brain drain was massive, especially in 2020, 2021. And for the people who are there, what can I do? I just sit there smoking nargila. Hopefully something will happen. And when you ask people about the situation now, they tell you, what crisis? Like, this has been ongoing for a long time. The sad reality is people normalized the situation. You go there, it's as if there's nothing. People have accommodated to the situation. They live their life normally as if like there is nothing, everything is functioning normally. And those who managed to leave the country, left the country. Unfortunately, a lot of the medical doctors, highly educated, skilled people between the age of 25 and 40 left the country between 2020 and 2021. And those are the sort of the bulk of any functioning economy, but also for any calls for reform or changes. They are not there anymore. And unfortunately, this frustration leads to, okay, like you go to the supermarket to buy your grocery, like everything is in US dollars. You pay for it, you leave, as if like when I look at this, how this is functioning, nobody knows. But there is a lot of remittances that comes from abroad that help people internally. Some people do suffer, but when you go to the restaurants, etc., everything is full. Like you try to get into a booking in a restaurant over the weekend, you cannot even find a seat. So people basically normalized it, like, okay, it's another phase of crisis that we have been facing for decades. Since the creation of Lebanon, we are based on crisis, so why to bother? Like, if things change better, fine. If not, that's how it is. I will conclude with the external dimension, and I think I will be a bit quick because I think I'm going over time. I still have time. So one of the also reasons for the crisis is the external dimension. Lebanon is divided, and unfortunately, what is Lebanese identity? This is still not answered. Because you have people who have more loyalty to the Gulf states than Lebanon. You have people who have more loyalty to France than Lebanon. You have people who have more loyalty to Iran than Lebanon. Like, how can you create this national identity when Iran and Saudi Arabia decided to use Lebanon as a proxy war, and Saudis decided, like, okay, Lebanon is run by Hezbollah, so we're not going to give them any support or any funds. And you have two groups. One group looks at the Saudis as they are pro-West, they are the US tell them whatever they want to do, etc. And you have a group that looks at the Saudis, Americans, etc., as like, this is what we want, what we aspire to. And unfortunately, you have some people are caught in the middle. But this conflict since the Arab, especially after the Arab uprising and the Syrian war, escalated further, and that also led to the escalation or deterioration in the relationship between Lebanon and Saudi Arabia, which has been like the traditional historical ally of Lebanon. And that's also has to deal with the changes in the leadership in Saudi Arabia. The traditional leadership that was more pro-Lebanon, pro-the region, now it's gone. Now you have a new generation who doesn't have this strong ties to Lebanon, etc. Another thing that I will talk about also is the refugee crisis, because we always talk about the internal problem, but the Syrian refugee crisis put a lot of pressure on the country. A country that is almost 5.5 million. You have over 1 million refugees that are registered. In a country that is considered to be a failed state, nothing is functioning. Imagine adding 1.1 or 2 million people to that country. And some European countries, I have to say it, complain about a few thousand. Like, it's a bankrupt state, a failed state, paralyzed state, you name it, whatever, with 5.5 million, totally divided population. Adding to this, the Syrian refugee crisis. What do you expect this will add to the situation? It will add to the misery in the country. Because if you need, for example, certain amount of diesel per month for the entire population, now you need more. Many of them don't pay taxes. Okay, they get support from the United Nations, but like even like in terms of education, we're always criticized for not allowing or being discriminatory against Syrians when it comes to public education. Public education hasn't even been it's very, very, very underdeveloped and needs a lot of funds, and it can barely sustain for the Lebanese. And then you add to it another dimension. At one moment, I remember, they had three schedules per day. So the morning school, afternoon, and night school to accommodate. But in a system that is not functioning, the currency collapsed. Who's going to teach 3 times a day with like peanuts in terms of salary? And sometimes they get salary, sometimes they don't, because of the situation. So this was additional problem, and no one is even now, like when we talk about like they have to go back to Syria, we're being criticized for being racist, we don't, etc. But like, imagine the situation in the country. Like, it's unbearable anymore. It's not unbearable for the Lebanese. So imagine if you are Syrian living there. And one of the things that Lebanon avoided doing is to have refugee camps for the Syrians, because of the refugee camps that we have with the Palestinians. They came after 1948 as temporary situation. You can do the math, 1948 until now. The only camp that was bombed is Nahr al-Barid, and was basically due to issues with terrorism, etc., and the army got a green light to go there. For the rest of the camps, keep in mind that this is one of the issues of limited statehood. The Lebanese government doesn't control these camps. They are controlled by the Palestinian authorities. And that's why the Israel-Palestine conflict does matter for us a lot. With the Abraham Accords that has been ongoing since Trump, with the Gulf countries, they thought that they thought that maybe if the Palestinian question is forgotten, nobody even is talking about the right of return of the refugees in the neighboring countries. They thought that maybe if we settle the agreements with the Gulf countries and the other countries without involving those who are the direct neighbors of Israel, who have issues either in terms of territories being still occupied, or the refugees. Like, as if this will just solve itself without anything. And this is not the case. And now, after what happened on October 7th, suddenly the two-state solution is back on the agenda. Suddenly, oh, there is still the Palestinian problem. Suddenly, yeah, we have to do something. And now the discussion is about what happens after the end of the war in Gaza. But without talking about the war, this does matter for us. We have around 450,000 Palestinian refugees. The situation in the camps is catastrophic. It's beyond catastrophic. I've been to some of them. Even for animals to survive there, sorry to say it, is not appropriate. So imagine the situation. Sewage system doesn't work. You have families of 5, 6, 7 members living in one small, tiny room. The buildings are next to each other. So, once I went to one of the camps, like you walk, the water, like you're walking, stepping on water from the sewage system, but also you have electric wires just touching your head. I'm not that tall. Imagine like someone who's taller, and you can see like kids with Kalashnikov or any, so if you go inside, you're on your own, because if something happens to you inside, the Lebanese government or the army or so will not come to rescue you. Because again, the camps are run by the Palestinian authorities, and each camp has different group. So this is a problem that also, if there's a talk about any two-state solution or any solution for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, which is now like it's a far-fetched thing to think about, but this will has to include Lebanon, has to include Syria, because we have also territories that are under occupation. And you have Palestinian refugees that have the right to return. Lebanon cannot also keep them there. Keep in mind that the sectarian issue is also problematic here, because with the Syrian refugees, who are majority Sunnis, this will affect the balance in the country. And it's already fragile. Add to them 450,000 who are fully Sunnis, do the math. And that will basically unbalance the entire situation. Last but not least, so you can see that this is the wall with in the south, and now the situation there, and this is also like on the south. This is like zooming out. The situation there is very fragile, is volatile. Any missed missile can lead to a full-fledged war between Hezbollah and Israel. And that pushes us even further, that any solution for the Arab-Israeli conflict has to take into consideration, forget about the Abraham Accords or so, has to include the parties that are involved in the crisis, the Palestinians, the Syrians, the Lebanese mostly. So these three has to be involved in any solution or any two-state solution, because the Syria and Lebanon do have Palestinian refugees, and the Palestinians basically are refugees within their own territory. Last but not least, do you know where this picture was from? Any guess? Yeah, this was in 2006. So it's not from Gaza, but the situation in Gaza is almost the same. And why the war in Gaza does matter not only for us in Lebanon, but for the entire Arab world and the West, is the consequences of that war. And people are watching the destruction, the killing, etc. And regardless what you say, when people are watching kids or so being killed, you want to tell me that they are used as a human shield or a human shelter or a human whatever. Nobody cares. They see a kid, a child, being killed, whether it's on any side. That's a no. So imagine people watching the social media, and like people in the Middle East watch Al Jazeera. And Al Jazeera is 24/7 putting these, like what's happening. What is happening to the societies in the Middle East? how do they view the West and the Western position, where we see like over 13,000 innocent civilians killed, and nobody is trying to do much, unfortunately. But this will affect not only us now, but generations to come. And it's also affecting us in the West with Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, you name it. Like if you're walking on the street, you look a little bit Arab, you're afraid from the others. And the others, they are afraid to even show any religious sign. And that will affect us everywhere. Time is ticking. I hope that the pause will lead to a ceasefire and maybe some political solutions before it is too late. Finally, I will conclude. Coming back to Lebanon, Lebanon is a paralyzed state. With all the mess I told you, I hope I didn't confuse you with all the information, but like it is a messy situation in Lebanon, so you know. Hope and reform is far-fetched, and all the regional, or the war with Gaza even pushed things further away. Trust in institutions collapsed long time ago. Nothing is functioning, yet people still pay taxes, at least a portion of the people, because there are places that do not pay taxes or bills or anything, but they get everything from if the government is providing anything. One of the dominant problems that needs a solution is, bless you, sectarianism. Sectarianism is a disease in the country. And if it is not solved, regardless how, this will continue to prolong the crisis further and further, and any solution will not be really permanent, but will be temporary. One of the survivors of the crisis are the political elites, unfortunately. Because the judiciary is in their hands, they scratch each other's back, the politicians, even if they, on the TV, on the screens, they fight each other, in reality, they don't hurt each other, because if one of them collapse or fall, the rest will fall, because they are all complicit in what happened in the country and bankrupting the country over the past decades. And last but not least, regional wars and players, as I said in my last part of the talk, do affect the situation in a country that has loyalties with a lot of the regional countries. And sorry for taking long. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Assem. This has been a very powerful explanation of everything that is going on in Lebanon, and not only in the last 5 years, as you started saying with in 2019, but basically for decades. This is an endemic problem that's been long in coming together. We have about 15 minutes left. We started a little bit late, so we can extend ourselves 5 minutes beyond the hour. So I will open up the floor now for anyone who would like to ask Assem a question. And if you would be so kind to identify yourselves before you ask your question, that would be very nice. Thank you. Don't forget to state your name.
My question is, how does the future look like for Lebanon? What are your predictions for the country's future?
Can I ask your name?
Emin.
Okay.
I'm from Turkey.
Okay, great. It's just interesting to know.
So shall I answer, or shall we collect?
Any other burning questions? Yes, thank you very much. Take 2 and 2.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Paula. I'm a student of International Relations Master. I would like to ask you, because I don't think I've heard it, if there's any optimistic way out. What's the light at the end of the tunnel for Lebanon? Because I don't know, I didn't really cut it from the explanation you've had.
Thank you very much. Assem?
Thank you. I think the questions do overlap. So, like trying to be optimist, seeing the situation over the years and monitoring it closely, and talking about the crisis that is coming, and no one was even listening or ignoring, makes you like just like, I did tell you that this is going to happen. Unfortunately, at the time being, I'm trying to be optimist, but there's no, like at least in the short term, there's nothing positive of what's going on. However, maybe if the war in Gaza ends and we do push for a solution to the Palestinian question, so that they finally have their state, a functioning state, and this will be part of a regional plan, there maybe things will move forward. If this situation with Israel ends with its previous wars, like 2006, 2008, you name it, then the situation in the region will keep moving on, unfortunately. Like one of the reasons, for example, a very simple reason, Hezbollah in the southern part of Lebanon. Hezbollah for many is a terrorist group, for many is a resistance group. There are parts of the country that are still occupied. And the reason why they have their weapons is we are protecting you from Israel, and we want to basically get back our territories. So again, if things go like that, I'm not that optimist, but hopefully if especially the United States get back to its neutral objective position, because the only one who can stop the war, unfortunately, or can push for a proper ceasefire and let us talk, is the United States. And doesn't seem like it at the moment. The EU has a lot of power to use, but unfortunately it's not using it. I wrote a piece with a colleague of mine about the economic powers of the EU in the Euronews, and basically we have a lot of powers here in the EU, but unfortunately the division, the lack of cohesion resulted in the EU losing a lot of its legitimacy in the region, and that brings us back to the pessimist view in the role of the EU that it can play. Of course, not generating, because some member states are viewed more positively than others, but overall, like the EU institutions, especially like at the level of the higher representative and the president of the Commission, like haven't been very helpful for the legitimacy and the neutrality, objectivity of the EU. So that will lead to more problems, unfortunately. If things go in the right direction and finally everyone in this world who is influential gives the international law the supremacy, and we push for a solution and permanent solution in between Palestine and Israel, and that take into consideration also the rest of the region in which peace will be established, then maybe things will go forward. But at the time being, everything is on hold because, like, as I said, no one is even talking about the crisis. And the Lebanese are not, this is the problem, the Lebanese and the Lebanese politicians are not trying to helping themselves. So we don't, even putting the plans as suggested by the IMF or fulfilling the demands of the IMF, it's a huge like crisis between the executive who's considered to be taking the IMF side against the people's interest, and the parliament who's not even pushing forward for anything. And the other problem is some political parties refuse that the parliament convenes because you don't have a president. And according to the law, the parliament is now supposed to elect a president, and if this is the only thing that the parliament should do. But there's another opinion that says like, okay, what if this lasts forever? What do we do? But this also, the divisions in the country doesn't help us at all. So, and the other thing is European countries, especially like France and like countries that we have historical ties with, could have done much more. But unfortunately, with the port explosion, the position of Macron coming, meeting with the political elites who basically are responsible for that, and giving them sort of legitimacy, this didn't play well. And now, again, like France's position in the region is not that great because of what's happening. And you can see that people compare like between the position of France now and the position of Jacques Chirac or even General de Gaulle times. So people do, and now with the social media, everything is spread. So on that note, like I don't see any light actually, at least for the time being, because everything now is about Gaza. And unfortunately, if the Lebanese do not want to help themselves, nobody will rush to help them, especially in these times, because there are more demanding situations than a small country that is facing like economic and political crisis. But hopefully they will come to their sanity, the politicians.
Gemma?
You were talking about
Wait.
Thank you. It's Gemma Varel from the IMET. You were talking about sectarism all the time in a negative or in a paralyzed manner, no? And well, looking back Lebanon 15, 20 years ago, always this idea to balance, no? Diversity, it has been an example in, bueno, a way to resolve politically a question that is diversity, because we don't have enough countries now, or not a lot of countries that can manage this, because the hegemony of cultural diversity has been the pattern. So I'm a little bit also curious to understand your point of view about the future of this diversity, not in terms of sectarism, but in which way we can envisage that the diversity in Lebanon can bring some positive feedback to go ahead, no? It seems difficult now, looking at the picture and seeing how the elites of the sectarian forces are playing. This means that this perhaps is finished as a model?
Thank you.
We have time for one final question.
Hi, I wanted to ask if you think that this complicated situation that you described before is what is preventing Nasrallah and Hezbollah to fully engage in the current conflict. If that's the reason, if they are afraid that, entering there, they don't know what can happen, and if the country could explode or implode because of that.
Big questions.
Thanks. Very good questions. And also the first two as well. Like sectarianism in a way, or diversity in the society, is always appreciated at a cultural level. We're a multicultural country with different traditions, religious traditions, etc. And this is still to a certain extent maintained at the local level. The problem is when the politicization of sectarianism. So what the politicians have been doing for such a long time is using sectarianism for their own political benefits, instead of having it as a enriching thing in a society that is multi-sectarian and which adds to the richness of the history, traditions of the country. This over the past years have been used politically to say that we are the protectors of this sect and you are the protector of that sect, etc. Now, when I talk about sectarianism in a negative sense, to clarify what I meant is mostly at the political level. For example, having different sects, 17 or even more diverse groups living together, you have also mixed neighborhoods. It's not that each sect is living separate from the other. This is something that is great. You see, like you go to Beirut, you see the mosque, the church next to each other. So you see, like, this diversity is still there. The biggest problem for sectarianism is at the political level. And the Taif Agreement in 1989, and then which became the Constitution in 1990, did discuss steps to end this sectarianism at the political level. And one of the things that the Taif Agreement talks about is having two houses in the parliament. One is the lower house, which is based on non-sectarian elections, based on Lebanon as one constituency. Okay, so you vote for the entire list or so. So there's a lot of reforms that weren't taken into consideration. And the upper house would be sort of the House of Lords, or represent the various sects in the country, to ensure that whatever law comes doesn't violate someone's else traditions or religion. This didn't even exist. It didn't happen. Even also at the senior levels, it became also in the last years that it became so annoying that not only the senior levels are taken at the sectarian level, sectarian basis, but even the lower positions. And politicians use it as like, yeah, I am gaining back the rights of this group or that group. And if, for example, you have a concours to join one of the of the civils, like one of the bureaucracies, and you have those who pass the exams are from specific religion or from a specific sect, they might not be hired because of the balance. And this all, like the Taif Agreement and the Constitution of the 1990 did talk about getting rid of that. Unfortunately, what the politicians have been doing over the past years is, instead of getting rid of that, they increased sectarianism in the public sector. And that's the problem. And every minister who comes to his ministry brings his, like, if you're from that political party who belong to that, then the entire ministry is full of unneeded, unnecessary civil servants, bureaucrats who belong to a specific sect because the minister is from that sect. So in that sense, at the political level, it is a catastrophe. At the cultural, societal level, and we've seen it with in one of the pictures, like in the protests in 2019, no one was talking about sectarianism. Like Christians, Jews, Muslims from different sects were on the streets in Beirut demanding that those politicians leave. And then what the politicians use, some groups, is they use their political parties who belong to certain groups to attack those. And then they started, yeah, if you call that, for example, Hariri is corrupt, or like Berri is corrupt, the Speaker of the House, or whatever politician is corrupt, oh, no, he's not corrupt. Your politician is corrupt, my politician is good. And that resulted in the protest of 2019 basically leading nowhere. Because again, people who started protesting on the streets, you're talking about youth, highly educated, who used the peaceful way of trying to change things. And then they were treated very badly by the political elites. And they used it against them. And they started sending their groups to protest, demanding that for counter protests, basically. So that's, I hope this explains the complex situation. As for the last but not least question, I think this is, the thing is, for, when Nasrallah came out and gave his speech, the first one, everyone was waiting for that speech. And I had some discussions with friends. I don't expect much. Like, they are still, like, there are certain hidden rules of engagement between the Israelis and Hezbollah. You attack something, we attack the same. Now, this has been escalating over the past weeks, but I don't think it moved to a place where it will lead to a war with Israel. Both parties do not need it, want it, even if they say otherwise. This is one. The second thing, one of the things that also in those discussions is Hezbollah doesn't, also is part of that society. In 2006, when the war happened, the people from the south and the suburbs had to move somewhere else. And the entire population was in favor of, was like hosting those refugees, etc. Now the situation is different. This like support for Hezbollah is divided. Some people do support Hezbollah and that they should stay and they are militarized, etc. Others say no. The Lebanese army is supposed to defend the country, and Hezbollah can get rid of the military branch and stay as a political party. They have their MPs, etc. So they do take this into consideration, that the large support they had in 2006 doesn't exist now. The second thing is the dear situation in Lebanon also doesn't, like, if Israel attacks, or if there is a war between Hezbollah and Israel, we saw what's happening in Gaza. And we saw what happened in 2006. So, and the situation now, no one is even, we've seen it, like no one is rushing to help Gaza, so no one will even rush to help us because they will consider that we played with fire. So all these things are taken into consideration. One of the things that Nasrallah said in one of his, in the last speech as well, and some of the Hamas leaders also mentioned, is that what they are trying to do from Yemen to Iraq to Syria to Lebanon is to divert the attention and the full focus of Israel on Gaza. So they sense of ease the pressure a little bit. And on the southern part of Lebanon, like the northern part of Israel, you have around 100,000 Israeli soldiers just there, who could be in Gaza. So in a way, there is a very tricky balance. But as we were talking earlier, like any misfired missile, we're talking about, like, it's not like any misfired missile that results in major casualties would lead to an escalation of the war. Now, some would hope for that maybe this will be that sort of the big explosion in the Middle East, and then a new Middle East will be created, but at what expense? Unfortunately, in all these wars, civilians pay the biggest price. I hope that things will stop and we can give people in the region, especially in the conflict zone, some hope that there's still a future for them to look forward for it. I hope that our politicians will come back to their senses regardless and stop all this war that has been ongoing for decades. And we have failed to even stop it. We just simply ignore it. So I hope something will happen positively, that all this bloodshed will end somehow. And not only in the Middle East, but also because the Ukrainians have been suffering also for a while now. And the casualties are massive. And we're talking about like civilians, unfortunately. And for the EU to live in peace, and to have it's important also to have stable neighborhoods, whether it is on the east or the south.
Thank you, Assem, and I truly share your hope that conflict will end soon and that there will be some kind of resolution. And I also sort of think to myself that there's got to be something to, I mean, I've always seen the Lebanese people as extremely resilient. I mean, they've lived through decades and decades of disasters and problems and crises, as we talked about. But they're, as a people, they're extremely resilient, and they're very good at coming up with solutions to different things. The solution is there somewhere. It's just that somebody's got to put themselves to the front and carry the torch in terms of this. Anyhow, on that note, on that little bit hopeful note, we're going to end this. Join me now thanking Assem for coming with a big round of applause.
Thank you.
Very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Of course. The ones that